Hello, Rick here, Certifiably Ingame again, and of course another recap on Episode 3 of Star Trek Discovery. Context is king. So right off the bat, just to be honest, I didn't actually like this episode as much as I liked the first two. Maybe it's because I'm just burnt out on sort of like the whole war theme of Star Trek already, or perhaps it's because I've just watched The Expanse Season 2, but a lot of elements to this storyline didn't quite, well, I didn't feel they'd gel properly. But I'll get to them as I go through the video. So first off, we see Michael Burnham. It's been 6 months since she's been serving her time, when she's seemingly transferred out of nowhere to another colony or whatnot, we don't know, but along the way, they're intercepted by the USS Discovery. Not before, of course, we get some exposition on background about how she's seen in the wider galactic community now, and especially amongst the Federation. She's seen as, I think they call her several times, the first mutineer. Anywho, some energy-draining microbes threaten to down the shuttle, so the pilot goes out to, I guess, cleanse them from the hull. Well, she lasted all of 5 seconds as she gets blown away in the storm and dies, and no one ever looks for her ever again. End of. Written off the story. Doesn't matter. Anyway, the Discovery's here. Yay, moving on. Alright, I've got to say though, the look of the Discovery has grown on me a bit, especially since its redesign. When it's in motion, when it's actually flying around and you get the cinematic shots of it, it's gorgeous. And again, I've got to say, Discovery has got the budget for the CGI. It looks amazing. It looks great. It's the best looking Trek's been on TV at least. Well, I mean, in my opinion. In fact, go caption the entire video IMO. This is all of what's obviously my own opinion. So we're introduced to Landry as the cons get off the shuttle. Yeah, I liked her. I bought her role as security chief. But as they're being led around the ship, they do point out that even though it's a scientific looking vessel with lots of science crewmen around, there are the occasional Starfleet officers wearing black badges. Now this is deliberately called attention to, so it makes me think it's going to be a plot point later on, perhaps even suggesting covert ops, perhaps even Section 31. So surprise, surprise, Lieutenant Saru is now actually a Commander Saru and is in fact the first officer of the Discovery. Now I like this. This was a good role reversal between Burnham and Saru. They've always been snippy at each other and trying to one-up each other, but now their roles have been completely reversed. In fact, not so much inversed as he's now the second head honcho on the ship and she's literally the bottom of the ladder. In fact, until she sees him, judging by her reactions to everything around her, including almost dying, it's as if she doesn't care anymore, as if she's given up. So I like Lorca's reveal as well. He seems quite casual, quite approachable. Although he does state that there are no free rides on his ship, so he's going to put all the convicts to work. This makes me think that perhaps this casual, relaxed demeanour is actually sort of a front that he's going to be using. In fact, there's a scene later on that sort of supports this. But overall, he seems different from Kirk, Picard, Archer, and the fact we're going to be viewing him from the first officer's point of view and the rest of the crew's point of view as well, I think is going to lend a long way to building a unique standalone captain. We're also introduced to Tilly, who's going to be Burnham's bunkmate. Meh. Okay, that's unfair. She's there to grow. I think that's going to be her character arc. She's going to learn from Burnham, she's going to learn from Lorca, and she's going to develop into her own outstanding officer. But at the minute, she's just a bit of a bumbling cadet trying to find her place. It's an archetype we've all seen before. So then we get a black alert and all the lighting dims and some strange stuff starts to begin to happen. We'll learn later that this is signifying the Discovery's Spore drive usage. So I don't have a problem with Burnham being assigned to engineering, and I don't really have a problem with Stamets, the mycologist, or the rest of the crew's approach to her. After all they've heard of her are the rumours and hearsay that have gone around. In fact, they seem to be shouldering the entire start of the Klingon War on her shoulders. I think this is going to be an interesting dynamic for her to have to come to cope with. After all, everyone she's met, convicts, security officers, even her old friends, have all been treating her with this distance and disdain. In my opinion, though, the opening episodes of Star Trek Discovery would have gone down almost identically even if she hadn't have been there. I mean, the Klingons were relying on the Federation's attempted suing for peace, on repeated attempts, to prove that they were weak and that their overall goal was a sort of peaceful expansion and colonisation which threatened their very culture. They had this planned. Takufma had this plan from day one. All of Burnham's plans, in effect, failed. So her being there or not, events would have unfolded exactly the same. She's effectively, I guess, the scapegoat almost for the Federation. So, skipping over some foreshadowing and exposition, we skip to probably one of the most irritating scenes I've seen yet in the Star Trek Discovery, where she manages to bypass a breath analyzer by stealing some saliva and spraying it into the opening. That seems incredibly insecure, especially for a suspected Black Ops ship like Discovery, with all sorts of confidential research going around. And a breath analyzer is really the best lock you can put on the door? I mean, stealing a key would have been harder. A fingerprint scanner would have been harder. A retina scan would have been harder. A voice print would have been harder to bypass. No, you know what? I take it back. Landry, you suck at your job. Anyway, moving on. So, after bypassing the lock, she walks into a room, a big room, and she discovers it's full of these little ethereal, blue, glowing particles dancing around like dust in a sunbeam. Wait a minute, that's the Expanse. Sorry, I don't know how those slides ended up there. Let me try again. There we go, very different. These ones have plants. So anyway, Lorca needs to assemble an away team to go over to the Discovery's sister ship, which has had an accident during which everyone on board has been killed. So, along with all the named characters we've seen so far, except for Lorca and Saru, Uncle Burnham is sent over, and it's during this trip that we learn of Stamets' view of Captain Lorca, and this is alluding to the points that I mentioned earlier, where I think that his approachable demeanour may be a facade. Stamets is of course incredibly bitter because he's been split up from his research partner, and said research has been co-opted by the Federation and potentially being used for military purpose. He goes so far as to call Lorca a warmonger. We can see that these two don't get along from their first interaction we see them having together, where he effectively questions and snaps at the captain. The captain brushes it off as he's just given him the bad news that his research partner has died. But at the same time, you've got to think these are Federation officers and they should behave as such. That was another point that sort of irked me a little bit. So they proceed onto the dimmed, twisted form of the Discovery's sister ship, and it goes into almost downright horror territory because they discover some mutilated, twisted corpses where the bodies have literally been warped out of shape. They quickly infer the presence of Klingons, because there are Klingon bodies there as well. However, the Klingons have been killed by lacerations and beatings, as opposed to this sort of twisted mutation that seems to have afflicted the rest of the crew. And the most fun Klingon in the universe then pops out to tell them to shush because there's something else around. He's then promptly killed by said monster. Rest in peace, sneaky Klingon, rest in peace. So, after a daring escape during which they grab as much research data and materials as they can salvage, Burnham climbs into the vents to try and avoid the alien monstrosity. God damn it, wrong slide again. I know I've got the right one around here somewhere. There we go. So after successfully navigating the Jeffries tubes of a ship she's never been to before, and successfully making a jump into a moving shuttlecraft from said vents, they return to the Discovery, where of course she demands an explanation. Well, not so much demands as more surmises before being dragged before Lorca. I mean, she is effectively a criminal and no longer an officer, and therefore not in a position really to demand anything. But she has surmised that the Discovery is up to scientific research, but of the Black Ops kind, where all the results are going to be turned towards war. Having already been burned once by the Federation, she automatically assumes that Lorca wants her on board to make use of her massive intellect, as well as potentially use her as the fall in case they ever get found out or things go wrong. So it turns out this pioneering technology that they're working on isn't in fact a weapon as it may have first seemed. It was genuinely an accident that killed the crew of the sister ship. I keep calling it that because yes, I have forgotten its name. Now, aside from the similarities with the Expanse and with the Alien franchise, which I don't mind, everything's been done before. It's hard to create something that's genuinely new, and anything that's an atmospheric science fiction empty spaceship sort of thing is going to get compared to Alien. I meant that mostly as a joke. But aside from those, this is probably my biggest criticism of Star Trek Discovery. However, I do also see a potential for redeeming the series and perhaps even incorporating it into continuity. So this explanation is going to be a little vague as I'm not a quantum physicist, let alone a quantum microbiologist, or a mycologist, or an astromycologist, or lots of other ologists at the end, evidently. But the basic summary of the Discovery's research goes something like this. Nature has a constantly reflecting design of this giant web of interconnected things. You could look at multiverses as this sort of thing. You can look at the spread of dark matter across the universe. You can look at the web of neurons that make up the nerves and the feelings of the human body and brain. And of course, this is where mycology, the study of mushrooms, comes in. Mycelium are the web-like fungal growth, the strands of the fibres that create a web-like net across the planet below the soil. Now this could be compared to sort of like a web-like energy structure in subspace, below the universe, below sight, below what we can see, but it's there. It's a network of energy, of life, of something else, all interconnected. Now these spores, these bioorganic capsules of energy, whether literal fungi or not, it's irrelevant for now, but the spore drive taps into this web-like structure, allowing for near instantaneous travel faster than the speeds of warp. So it's like navigating beyond subspace. It's a whole new way of locomotion and travelling, involving manipulating the quantum realm. As Stamets puts it, physics as biology. Now, as for the whole continuity point, this is a complete wild speculation and theory, but it involves delving into the fabric of the universe by the look of it. It involves quantum mechanics and tampering with the actual forces that create and shape reality. This near instantaneous travel is obviously something that doesn't happen by the time of the original series, and it's definitely not even present when it comes to TNG. So it's obviously not going to lead anywhere. Or does it? Perhaps the experiments are successful. Perhaps their ability to transfer an entire ship from one place to another by navigating this substructure, this mycelium of the universe, has dire consequences. It could fracture reality. You are playing with the forces of creation after all. Perhaps it leads to weird things like Burnham being erased from existence, or a shift in what technology was available at the times as you changed the background of the Federation, the paths that it took. Events unfolding differently, people appearing and disappearing from the timeline, multiple versions of the same person. All sorts of weird events could be happening due to the effect of this quantum meddling. Of course, it's equally likely that I'm completely wrong, and this is just me trying to reconcile every sort of Star Trek fact in existence into one neat package. Although I do reserve the right to say, I told you so, or called it, if something like this does eventually happen. So that's the episode. It looks to be building the majority of the plot for the rest of the series now, but I've got to say, to be honest, I wasn't as engrossed as I was within the first 2 episodes. It was alright, but whereas I gave the first 2 episodes together a 5 out of 10, maybe even a 6 out of 10, this would be 4, really. Now, I'm by no means a licensed critic or anything like that, so it is literally just an arbitrary number given by a Trek fan. But I did feel that this episode, the pacing was kind of off, and at times the characters acted in such a way that simply served the plot rather than their actual character and their personalities. Now maybe that's not fair, because we've only been introduced to these people for 3 episodes, some of them even just 1 episode, but that's just how I feel. Let me know what you guys thought. I'll be curious to see different opinions of this, because I've not had a chance to actually have a look around. There's not as much on this episode as there was on episodes 1 and 2, which acted as sort of a introduction into Discovery, the series as a whole, and therefore garnered a lot more attention. So yeah, thanks for watching. I've been Rick, and this has been my rambling on episode 3 of Discovery, as well as some wild speculation into the nature of the series as a whole based on quantum mushrooms. Oh, and Captain Lorca kept the big blob beastie because of course he did. Mwahahahahaha. I'm up to something. It's totally not going to bring me into conflict with my first officer in a very Garth of Izar style story arc. Now I'm off to write a fanfic about Sarek ingesting some magic mushrooms and serving 10 years of Romulan ship captain. Goodbye.